My name is Sophia, and for nearly 6 years, I have played the role of the perfect wife. Married to Ethan, a distinguished attorney whose relentless ambition and unwavering dedication earned him admiration from all, our life together appeared flawless. We lived in an elegant townhouse in a prestigious neighborhood, attended glittering social events, and enjoyed the warm praise of friends and family. Yet behind this impeccable facade, a storm of loneliness and unfulfilled longing raged silently within me. In the early days of our union, Ethan's love felt like a gentle, all-encompassing embrace. He would surprise me with bouquets of roses on ordinary mornings and whisper tender words during our quiet dinners. I believed I had found my soulmate, the man destined to cherish me forever. But as the years passed, Ethan became increasingly absorbed in his career. Late nights at the courthouse, endless meetings, and frequent weekend business trips slowly eroded the tender moments we once shared. I began to feel like a ghost in a home that was otherwise filled with luxury and comfort. Every evening, as I sat by the window, watching twilight fade into night, a profound emptiness gnawed at me. I questioned whether the life I had once dreamed of was truly mine, or merely an illusion built on duty and routine. I craved more than just security. I yearned for passion, for the exhilarating sensation of being desired. Deep within, I mourned the loss of the vibrant, passionate woman I had once been. Then, on one fateful evening at a charity gala, an event I attended reluctantly to fulfill my social obligations, everything shifted. Amid a sea of impeccably dressed guests, my attention was captured by a man whose presence exuded an enigmatic charm. His name was Lucas. With tousled dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and a smile hinting at hidden secrets, Lucas was unlike anyone I had ever met. When our eyes locked across the crowded room, a dangerous spark ignited within me, setting my heart pounding with an intensity I had not felt in years. As if drawn together by fate, we gravitated toward one another. What began as a casual conversation about art and literature soon deepened into an exchange of dreams, desires, and unspoken regrets. Lucas listened to me with such intensity that I felt truly seen, as though he could understand the silent ache that had haunted me for so long. In his presence, fragments of the self I had long suppressed resurfaced, and I began to remember what it felt like to be alive. In the ensuing days and weeks, our encounters grew more frequent. A coffee date here, a quiet stroll through a moonlit park there. The innocent meetings rapidly escalated into furtive, passionate moments that defied all logic. Each stolen encounter filled the void within me, yet with every heartbeat, the weight of guilt pressed heavier on my conscience. I was betraying Ethan, the man who had once been my entire world, and still, every whispered word and tender glance from Lucas dragged me deeper into a labyrinth of forbidden desire. By the time the secret meetings became a regular part of my life, I realized that my heart was divided between the safe, predictable comfort of my marriage and the intoxicating, unpredictable thrill of this illicit passion. The duality tore at me relentlessly, leaving me in a constant state of inner conflict and despair. The more I tried to rationalize my choices with quiet justifications, "It's temporary. I deserve to feel alive," the more I felt the sting of each lie as it carved deeper into my soul. The passion Lucas offered was like a fire that both warmed and burned, illuminating the parts of me I had long forgotten while simultaneously consuming everything in its path. And so, I stand at the crossroads of my own making, haunted by the price of betrayal, a price measured not only in shattered dreams, but in the irreversible loss of the self I once knew. After those stolen moments with Lucas, the boundaries of my double life began to blur even further. Each day became a relentless struggle between the comfort of a familiar existence and the exhilarating pull of forbidden passion. I found myself waking with a heavy heart and going to sleep with a mind haunted by secrets. In the quiet hours before dawn, the silence of our home, once a sanctuary, echoed with the memories of tender moments, now replaced by guilt and longing. The days turned into a painful cycle. At work, I maintained a composed facade, yet inside, I was a maelstrom of emotions. Every time Ethan greeted me with a gentle smile or a loving gesture, I felt an internal shudder, a reminder of the trust I was slowly eroding. My thoughts were consumed by Lucas's intense gaze and the whispered promises we exchanged in the dark. That forbidden intimacy filled a void I had long ignored, but it also left me questioning everything I once held dear. Lucas became more persistent with each encounter. Our meetings, initially brief and discreet, gradually grew into longer sessions of confessions and confusions. In his presence, I experienced a vivid reawakening of the woman I once was. A woman who had dreams and desires beyond the confines of duty and routine. Yet every stolen kiss and secret embrace deepened the chasm between the life I led with Ethan and the life I craved with Lucas. I began to feel as though I were living two separate realities, each pulling me in opposite directions with equal force. As the weeks passed, the weight of my deception grew unbearable. Nights were the hardest. The darkness seemed to magnify the internal conflict that tore at me. I would lie awake, wrestling with the duality of my existence, torn between the unwavering stability of my marriage and the dangerous thrill of this illicit affair. The more I sought solace in Lucas's arms, the more I was reminded of the price I was paying. The erosion of trust, the betrayal of a man who had once been my entire world, and the loss of the self I used to know. I began to notice subtle changes in Ethan as well. His once bright eyes grew shadowed with worry, and his conversations took on a more measured, cautious tone. It was as if he sensed that something in our home was amiss, though he could not pinpoint its source. I felt his distance growing, even as I craved his presence. Each encounter with him filled me with a bitter mix of relief and remorse. The fear of discovery became a constant companion, lurking in every whispered phone call and every furtive glance exchanged with Lucas. One rainy evening, when the sky wept along with my unspoken sorrow, the inevitable confrontation arrived. I had returned from another secret meeting with Lucas, my pulse still racing from the thrill of our encounter, only to find Ethan waiting in the dim light of our hallway. His eyes, usually full of gentle kindness, now held a hardness that chilled me to the bone. In that moment, time seemed to slow, every heartbeat echoing the weight of my transgressions. "Sophia," Ethan said softly, his voice trembling with a mixture of pain and disbelief. "What is happening between us?" His question hung in the air, a fragile hope for honesty that I knew I could no longer sustain. In that suspended moment, the facade I had so carefully constructed crumbled beneath the crushing reality of my betrayal. I felt exposed, not merely in front of him, but before the truth of my own soul. The confrontation unfolded slowly, a painful exchange of words, laden with regret and shattered trust. I attempted to explain the emptiness that had driven me into Lucas's arms, the desperate need to feel alive in a world that had grown indifferent. But my words fell short, inadequate to mend the deep fractures that now marked our union. Ethan's silence spoke volumes. Every pause, every tear that glistened in his eyes was an indictment of the life we had once shared. In the aftermath of that confrontation, I found myself isolated within my own heart. The passion that had once promised escape now revealed itself as a harbinger of irreversible loss. Every memory of Lucas's tender touch, every echo of our secret laughter, was tainted by the realization that I had betrayed not only Ethan's trust, but also the woman I used to be. The duality of my existence, between the safe, predictable life with Ethan and the dangerous, unpredictable allure of Lucas, became a burden too heavy to bear. As I sat alone in the quiet darkness of our empty living room, the truth struck me with brutal clarity. The price of my betrayal was more than the loss of a man's love. It was the shattering of my own identity. I was caught in a relentless storm of desire and remorse, with no clear path to redemption. And so, I remain at the crossroads of my own making, haunted by the choices that have defined me and left me irrevocably divided. The days following the confrontation with Ethan were an endless haze. Every step I took felt like I was walking through a fog, each moment weighed down by the choices I had made. The house that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a prison, with the shadows of my actions lurking in every corner. I could no longer escape the suffocating guilt that clung to me, nor could I outrun the relentless longing for a life I could never have. Ethan and I no longer shared the same space in the way we once did. Though we continued to live under the same roof, the distance between us was palpable. His silence was more deafening than any argument could have been. We moved around each other like strangers, exchanging polite words, but there was no warmth, no tenderness left. The trust we had built together had been shattered, and no amount of time or words could rebuild what had been broken. I spent my days in an endless loop of self-doubt and regret. Every glance at Ethan filled me with an overwhelming sense of shame, and every meeting with Lucas seemed to intensify the inner turmoil. Lucas, too, had changed. What once felt like a passionate escape began to feel like a trap, a dangerous game that I couldn't quit. The spark that had once ignited so brightly between us now flickered weakly, overshadowed by the guilt and the weight of what I had sacrificed. Our encounters became more sporadic, tainted by the knowledge that every stolen kiss, every secret meeting, was one step closer to the inevitable end. I began to feel as though I was losing control, spiraling into a life of deceit and chaos that had no clear resolution. The more I sought solace in Lucas's arms, the more I felt like a ghost, an empty shell of the woman I once was. The passion that had once brought me so much joy now felt hollow, as if it were draining the very essence of my being. One evening, Lucas and I met at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city. It had been weeks since we had last seen each other, and I felt a strange sense of detachment as we sat across from one another. His smile, once so alluring, now seemed distant, like a mask hiding something more complex beneath. I could sense that he, too, was feeling the weight of our situation. "Sophia," he said, his voice quiet and hesitant, "we can't keep doing this. I can't keep doing this." His words hit me like a cold slap, though I had known deep down that this moment was inevitable. The thrill of our affair had faded, leaving behind only the wreckage of what we had once shared. I didn't respond immediately, unsure of what to say or how to make sense of the mess I had created. "I know," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I know it's wrong, but I don't know how to stop." The confession hung in the air, thick with the weight of its truth. We were two people caught in a web of our own making, unable to untangle ourselves from the consequences of our actions. And yet, despite the sorrow and the guilt, there was a part of me that couldn't let go of the passion, of the feeling that I was finally seen, finally understood. Lucas reached across the table and took my hand, his touch cold but firm. "Sophia, you have to choose. Ethan or me. You can't keep living in this limbo. It's destroying you, and it's destroying us." His words were a knife to my heart. I knew he was right. I had to choose. But how could I choose between two lives that had become so intertwined, so deeply ingrained in my soul? Ethan, with his quiet love and devotion, had been my anchor for so many years. He had given me stability, comfort, and a sense of belonging. And yet, in his absence, I had found something else, something wild and untamed, something that made me feel alive in ways I hadn't felt in years. But at what cost? That night, as I lay in bed beside Ethan, I realized that the consequences of my actions had reached a tipping point. The silence between us had become unbearable, and I knew I could no longer ignore the truth. My heart ached with the knowledge that I had hurt him deeply, that the man I had promised to love and cherish had become collateral damage in my pursuit of passion. The next day, I made a decision. I couldn't continue living in a state of constant conflict, torn between two worlds that could never coexist. I sat Ethan down in the living room, the same place where we had shared so many memories, and I told him everything. Every lie, every betrayal, every secret I had kept from him. The weight of my confession seemed to drain the life from me as I spoke, the tears I had been holding back finally spilling over. Ethan listened in silence, his face pale and expressionless. When I finished, he didn't say anything for a long time. The silence between us felt heavier than any words could convey. Finally, he stood up, his movement slow and deliberate, and walked to the door. "Sophia," he said, his voice quiet but steady, "I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." And with that, he left. In the days that followed, I found myself alone, grappling with the consequences of my actions. Ethan never returned. Our life, once so full of promise and love, had unraveled in the span of a few short months. And Lucas, too, disappeared from my life, leaving me with nothing but the hollow echo of what could have been. The price of betrayal, I learned, was not just the loss of trust, of the shattering of a marriage. It was the destruction of the person I had, and been the person I could never become again. The passion that had once burned so brightly now lay in ashes at my feet, and all that remained was the cold, unrelenting truth that I had paid the ultimate price for a fleeting moment of desire.